Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Premier. Does the Premier agree that the Treasurer's behaviour towards his departmental staff was in direct contravention to the South Australian Ministerial Code of Conduct that reads, and I quote, "Ministers must ensure that their personal conduct is consistent with dignity, reputation and the integrity of Parliament"?
Premier.
I answered this question yesterday, and it's certain, whatever the strict legal application of the Ministerial Code of Conduct, it's certainly not consistent with the spirit of the Code of Conduct, and that's why the minister apologised, and that's why he was publicly reprimanded.
Leader. Can the Premier confirm to the House that there was a breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct?
I've said that it's not consistent with the spirit of the Code of Conduct. It's not consistent with the spirit. I mean, look, the language of the code, if you look at it, seems to be talking about the language of the code seems to be talking about behaviour in Parliament. But I think the general point, the general vibe, if you like, of the Ministerial Code of Conduct is that people need to conduct themselves. People need to conduct themselves with dignity, and I think it is inconsistent. It is inconsistent with that. That's why the minister was reprimanded. That's why he has apologised, and he did that as soon as it was raised with him.
Before the leader asks his question, I warn the members for Adelaide. I call to order the members for Adelaide, Unley, Hammond, Schubert, Morialta, and the Deputy Leader, and I warn the Deputy Leader for the first time. Leader.
Very much. Did the Premier, on being aware of this breach, provide the Treasurer with a formal warning?
Premier.
Yes, he was brought into my office, and we had a meeting that went for something in the order of an hour, and we discussed the implications of his conduct, and the whole nature of the tenor of the communications was about the fact that this was unacceptable conduct and wouldn't continue in the future. And of course, you've seen his public apology.
I warn the member for Adelaide for the first time. Leader.
Can the Premier speak to the efficacy of that warning when the Treasurer, when on morning radio this morning, was asked the question, "Did you receive a warning from the Premier?" His answer was no.
Premier.
I can only repeat. Well, I think I've said publicly. I've said publicly that this conduct is conduct that will not be repeated, and if it is repeated, then there will be consequences. I don't know how much clearer I could be with the minister, and if he hasn't got the message now, I don't think he will ever get the message.
I call to order the members for Carvel and Wright, and I warn for the first time the member for Schubert. Leader.
Was the warning put in writing to the Treasurer?
No.
Were any notes of that meeting taken?
I mean, this is a pathetic line of questioning. There could not be a more public performance of every single element of this equation. At 9 a.m, the report was communicated to my office. I read it over the period of time between that time and the time when the minister came into my office. I had a meeting which went for something in the order of an hour where we discussed all of the implications of that report. I made it clear to him that the conduct, that the language that he used was inappropriate. He acknowledged that. We discussed in detail why the behaviour was inappropriate. I outlined those reasons in the House. The minister then went out publicly and acknowledged every element of why the behaviour was inappropriate, so it demonstrated that he understood that. I mean, this sits at the heart of proper disciplinary processes when one is raising questions of behaviour and performance in the context of an environment where a superior is seeking to raise matters and have changed conduct. It is precisely the way in which these matters should be dealt with. To actually start parsing and talking about whether something is recorded in writing, make some process note, when we are actually talking here about something which was dealt with entirely appropriately and in detail, in full public gaze, just trivialises the whole process.
What are we going to do today, boys? Let's use the weather of our
I call to order the members for Taylor, Chafee, Newland, Stewart, Hartley and the Leader, and I warn for the first time the members for Newland and Wright.
Thank you, sir. My question is to the Premier. Does the Premier accept the findings of Commissioner Lander that the Premier was aware of the Urban Renewal Authority Board's initial recommendation to reject the Gillman land deal from ACP?
Accept all of the recommendations that and findings that were made by the Commissioner, and indeed we have acted upon them. Indeed, it was obvious that was the case, because the relevant minister actually then went and spoke to the board, and after he spoke to the board, they made a further resolution, which was also communicated and formed part of our decision-making process. So, of course.
Leader.
Supplementary to that, sir, if the Premier was aware of the recommendation of the board, then why did the Premier state on the 13th of February 2014 on ABC Radio that, and I quote, "the only recommendation that was brought to me and to the Cabinet was the final recommendation"?
Because that amounted to the considered opinion of the board. The full Supreme Court makes absolutely clear that in respect of value, the later board decision superseded the earlier board decision, and that is a finding that is made. That is the recommendations. No, the recommendations that were made through the board came to us and superseded, and that was found directly by the full Supreme Court in their decision.
Why did you say
Sorry,
that?
how does some recommendation being superseded wipe the original recommendation completely from the record? The Premier stated that the only recommendation that was brought to me and to the Cabinet was the final recommendation. Is that correct, or did you mislead the people of South Australia?
Before the Premier answers, I warn the Leader for the first time. The Premier.
It's been made very clear that when the board considered the matter after the Minister had the opportunity to speak to them, they made a recommendation about this being good value, and in that respect the full Supreme Court decided and made a specific finding that that had superseded the earlier decision.
Leader.
Thank you very much. My question is to the Premier. Does the Premier concede that, as stated in the Ministerial Code of Conduct, ministers are responsible to the Parliament for their actions and the actions of the departments and agencies within their portfolio, and therefore the Treasurer must take overall responsibility for maladministration on the Gillman land deal?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it is a source of great disappointment that maladministration occurred within a state government agency. I have to take responsibility as a leader of the government, and individual ministers need to take responsibility for the behaviour of the agencies that sit within their portfolios.
I welcome today to Parliament students from Salisbury Primary School who are guests of the member for Ramsay. The Leader.
Given that in 1991, when maladministration was rife at the State Bank of South Australia, and the then Premier John Bannon resigned, stating that the buck stops with me, why shouldn't the Treasurer equally accept ultimate responsibility like Premier Bannon did?
Well,
Premier.
That's not the test for ministerial responsibility. The test for ministerial responsibility, which I think was elegantly set out in the DeBell report, is the personal responsibility of ministers for behaviour that they are either directly responsible for or which they have notice. There is no finding here in relation to the Ombudsman report that there was any particular culpability of the minister in respect of the decisions or advice or the maladministration that occurred. But let's remember here, we never sought to hide behind the the advice of the agency. I mean, we always accepted that this was a cabinet decision, and the cabinet decision was made in respect of this matter, and there was no finding of maladministration in relation to the cabinet decision or of any of the ministers who actually participated in the cabinet decision process. We were let down in some respects with during some of the process which led to this, but it does not affect, in my view, the nature of the decision that Cabinet took. I mean, every time we were seeking to promote this transaction and defend it against criticism in the lead up to the election, we made it absolutely clear that this was a cabinet decision and that we weren't seeking to hide behind the resolution that was made by the Renewal SA board. And indeed, Cabinet specifically took responsibility for actually making the decision off the Renewal SA board. The first Cabinet decision had a recommendation that it would go back to Renewal SA for decision, and we took it off them and made that decision ourselves because we viewed it as our responsibility. And when the Minister went to the board to talk to them because they had great reservations about the matter, and we now know, with the benefit of hindsight, were treated quite poorly by Renewal SA staff, he made it absolutely clear to them that it was a state government set of imperatives that we were seeking to advance, and he was prepared to listen, most certainly, to whatever they had to say, and if they had any concerns with the process, they should contact him directly and he would put to Cabinet precisely what their concerns were.
Deputy Leader.
So having accepted that ministers do take responsibility, the overall responsibility for maladministration, why has he allowed the Attorney-General to refer back to the Renewal SA agency responsibility for dealing with the maladministration of Mr Buchan?
Premier.
Well, because we have confidence in the agency to be able to effectively deal with this matter. For the first thing is that the
Deputy Leader's warned for the second and final time.
The agency has new leadership, which is a pretty fundamental reason because the Chief Executive of the agency now, Renewal SA, who has responsibility for dealing with these matters, is a different person and has not been the subject of criticism in the report of Commissioner Lander. And there's no reason to believe that this agency cannot effectively discharge its responsibilities. And indeed, if you look at the report where it sets out all of the steps that we've taken since this transaction to remedy deficiencies, the Commissioner Lander reaches the view that each of those steps that were taken were appropriate steps. And he only adds one further step to consider, which is reviewing the governance of the relationship between the Minister and the board and the Chief Executive, and that's something that we'll now turn our attention to.
Member for Taylor.
My question is to the Premier. Can the Premier inform the House about the government's unsolicited bid process and what response the state business community has made to this process?
Premier.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. One of the potentially unfortunate effects of the criticism of the Gillman transaction is that it could have put off companies from coming forward to government and making unsolicited bids about other transactions. And so we were very anxious to avoid that. So at an early time, what we did was establish a new process for dealing with unsolicited bids. A new process, I might add, that was cited with approval by Commissioner Lander in his report. We know that innovation will play a key role in our economy in moving from the old economy to the new economy, and so we do need people to come up with innovative ideas and promote them to government. Obviously, government doesn't have all the ideas and they will emerge from other quarters. But some people that have new ideas are reluctant to share them with government if they think that those ideas are not going to be respected in terms of their intellectual property. So, Mr Speaker, in common practice with other states, for some time we have established a proposal mechanism for dealing with unsolicited bids. We want to send a message that we are prepared to consider innovative proposals and ones that challenge the status quo. So we want to encourage that by giving a framework which is easily navigable and one which allows people to come forward with ideas like the sort of ideas that the young entrepreneurs who came forward with the Gilman proposal put to us. So far, Jim Hallion is in that role, former Chief Executive of DPC. The feedback we're getting about the way in which he's performing that role is excellent. So far, 84 proposals have been brought to the government for consideration, and a number of them have actually proceeded to the second stage of the unsolicited bid process. A number of them, of course, have been sent through the ordinary process, which is the process of tendering, which is generally speaking the common place in which we deal with these sorts of things. But proposals like Bickford's proposal to build a craft distillery and microbrewery in the former Kingscote Police Station, nearby land in the Kingscote Wharf Precinct on Kangaroo Island, Martindale Hall in the luxury resort and wellness retreat to attract tourists to the Clare Valley and Mid-North, and Victor Harbour proposal for a new tourism venture for Granite Island featuring opportunities to swim with marine life. So there is no doubt that some of these proposals will be controversial, but we're determined to actually give proposals like this a chance to succeed. It does need to meet certain thresholds. Obviously, there needs to be a good basis to depart from the usual process of going out to tender. And we certainly take that seriously. A committee of chief executives looks at this. The first step is a pre-lodgement meeting, and if the proposal progresses to the further stage, it's then referred to other government agencies. The initial proposal is then considered by Cabinet.
The process to which the Premier is now detailing out is outlined in sa.gov.au, business and industry and trade, as per what's in your inbox.
That may well be so, but this is in the context, I think, of the ICAC report on Gilman, and it has a whole new relevance because of that, and therefore I think, yes, I understand the member for Schubert's point, and I've upheld it many times before, but I'm not going to uphold it in this context.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'll leave aside the process and we can read online the process, but we are committed to continue to move all barriers that we possibly can to business growth. Those, I need to look at the challenges we have in terms of employment in South Australia to know that we cannot afford to turn our backs on innovative ideas that will grow jobs here in South Australia. That has been the motivation and the sole motivation for any of the decisions that we've taken in relation to these matters, and we're not going to be deflected from our course.
Deputy Leader.
My question is to the Premier. Will the Premier commit that the Treasurer will answer every question he is asked regarding the Gilman land deal? Because, as the Premier has previously stated, serious questions deserve serious answers.
Before the Premier answers, I neglected to call to order the member for Davenport, to warn the members for Hartley and Hammond for the first time, and to warn the member for Hartley for the second and final time. Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, but passing strange that a question should be asked about questions when they ran out of questions about Gilman halfway through yesterday's question time. A bit embarrassing, really. This was the big star turn for the week. Anyway, but look, let's just be a bit realistic. Let's be a bit realistic about questions and their answers. There have been more answers to questions under my leadership in relation to question time than have ever existed in this place. Ever have existed in this place. And I must say, the tone in which the answers, the tone in which we have given the answers has, by and large, I venture to suggest, has been more civil than perhaps in earlier times. I think that from time to time, when provoked, when the animal is attacked, it will defend itself from time to time, but by and large, there has been an improvement in the tone and the civility of this place. So I don't think there can be any criticism of the amount of information or the manner in which it's been progressed by my government.
Deputy Leader.
My question is to the Treasurer. Does the Treasurer accept his portrayal as a witness by Commissioner Lander, who said, and I quote, I found that Minister Koutsantonis was not inclined to answer direct questions directly. Witnesses who do not answer questions directly do not assist.
Mr Speaker, I answered all questions.
The member for Unley is warned.
I accept all the findings of the Commissioner, but I did my very best to cooperate with his inquiry and that of my office to cooperate with his inquiry, and I did my very best to give evidence to him, and I took an oath while I gave that evidence.
The Leader is warned for the second and final time, and the member for Stewart is warned. Deputy Leader.
A further question to the Treasurer. Does the Treasurer accept that he was a difficult witness to question, as stated in the transcript of the evidence, where the Treasurer said, "I'm not trying to be difficult, sir," to which the Commissioner answered, "Well, you are."
I don't think that categorises the entire point of the questioning. That was on one matter, and I immediately did all I could to assist the Commissioner in his investigations, and I support his findings.
Final supplementary on
Deputy
that matter,
Leader.
if I may. Is it the position of the Treasurer then that you answered all questions directly, except one, which was identified in this quote?
I support his findings, and I answered all questions truthfully and honestly. Over there.
My question
Leader.
is to the Premier, sir. Does the Premier think it is appropriate that a Minister of the Crown should be such a difficult witness when giving evidence to the Independent Commission against Corruption?
Mr Speaker, I know those opposite were hoping for something different out of the Ombudsman's inquiry conducted by Commissioner Lander. And they seek to travel beyond his findings to make political points in this place. We have accepted the criticisms that are contained in the report of the Minister, of the Treasurer. No, he accepts...
The Leader is living dangerously.
It is inappropriate to cite passages of transcript which are ultimately don't lead to findings in this report. It's the findings which are relevant, and it is the findings which which we have accepted, and it's the findings when they have led to findings of inappropriate language have been apologised for. Now, if the Commissioner had decided to make further and other findings about the Treasurer, I think we can see from the tenor of his report he wouldn't have hesitated to do that. And we are simply not going to permit those opposite from conducting their own and further elaboration on a very significant piece of work that was conducted by an eminent jurist and who has made findings, and we stand by those findings.
Supplementary.
Well, does the Premier accept this finding on page 28 of Mr Lander's report, when he said, "I found that Minister Koutsantonis was inclined not to answer direct questions directly. His evidence in relation to whether the 2nd December 2013 Cabinet submission should have been included particular information is but an example."
Premier.
Yes.
The member for Unley is warned for the second and final time. Premier.
Accept that one.
The member for Elder.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Investment and Trade. Can the Minister advise the House on the outcome of the most recent Small Business Roundtable?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Elder for the question, because the Small Business Roundtable was established by the government in September last year, with my colleague, the Treasurer and Minister for Small Business, co-hosting the forum with myself as Minister for Investment and Trade. Around 34 business and industry groups attend these sessions, and today I hosted the 4th roundtable. It was an opportunity for the government to explain recent reforms to the Return to Work Agency, initiatives in red tape reduction, proposed planning reforms, changes to industry participation guidelines and building export partnerships. More importantly, it was an opportunity to listen to these organisations and their concerns on behalf of their members. I can report that the reaction to the changes the government has made to reform what was known as work cover have been very well received indeed. The reduction in levies has had a noted impact on businesses, with an estimated $180 million being added to business bottom lines. I thank the Deputy Premier for his attendance at the round table this morning, where we heard that premiums were already falling amongst membership in small business organisations. Mr Speaker, there was also a presentation from the co-owner of an Adelaide winery on the capacity to grow business and jobs through exports. The company, based near McLaren Vale, has increased its revenue by 270% over the last 4 years. It's gone from being a domestic supplier only to a company that now sells 36% of its product to China. That's currently worth $3 million a year and growing, and as a result, the number of employees at the winery are growing. I can also add that the company's representative in China is an international student graduate of Adelaide University's wine business course, a Chinese-born Australian fluent in Mandarin. She's gone from being a Chinese local studying in Adelaide to an effective representative in China employed by a South Australian business. The business is one of many associated with the Export Partnerships Grants program offered by the state government. We recently added another 20 businesses to that list, with more than $440,000 worth of approved grants arranged in recent days. The roundtable is an open dialogue with small business leaders and will reconvene in February for its 5th meeting. I can assure the House that once again the state government will be listening to small business, who we recognise are creating the jobs for the future in this economy. As we act to assist small business, to promote their activities that will add to job opportunities for South Australians in South Australia, and the state government will continue to play its role in the transformation underway across the state and also across the nation.
Member for Newland.
Thank you, sir. And my question is to the Minister for Emergency Services. Can the Minister advise the House about the Tea Tree Gully State Emergency Service Unit's recent participation in the National Disaster Rescue Challenge in Canberra?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question and also acknowledge his close association with the unit and also the association of the member for Florey, who supports the unit as well. Mr Speaker, in June this year, I advised the House about the many achievements of the Tea Tree Gully State Emergency Service Unit, noting that the support they provided at Samson Flat in January this year. I also advised the House that the SES State Rescue Challenge, which is held every 2 years. The challenge involves rescue scenarios where SES teams are assessed on their response capabilities and compete against each other to promote learning and development of skills, validate operational capabilities and celebrate excellence. Mr Speaker, not only did the Tea Tree Gully unit win the state challenge in May this year, they have now also won 12 consecutive events. The unit subsequently qualified to participate in the National Disaster Rescue Challenge in Canberra, which was held early this year at the beginning of September. The South Australian team of the Tea Tree Gully unit competed against the best SES teams across Australia. I am pleased to note that the team finished a very respectable second. The team from Kiama SES unit in New South Wales won the event. However, Mr Speaker, I note that Tea Tree Gully unit has won this national event several times, most recently in 2011. I recently attended the unit to congratulate the volunteers with the member for Newland, and the member for Florey was an apology on the night because of illness, but her gift was well received by the unit members, a strong supporter of the unit, as well as other emergency services in his electorate. I was extremely pleased to provide 10-year service certificates to 2 volunteers, Mr Philip Hoskin and Mr Ian Britton. It was also an honour to acknowledge 25 years of service recently attained by volunteers Mr Andrew Buckle and Ms Megan Peel. Notwithstanding these outstanding achievements, all of the volunteers at the unit, led very well by Mr Phil Tan, are extremely professional and dedicated, and they are great ambassadors for their community, the SES and indeed our state of South Australia. We can all be rightly proud that the men and women of such calibre dedicate so much of themselves to keeping our state safe. I would once again like to congratulate the unit and thank them for their ongoing support to the community. Finally, Mr Speaker, back in May this year, the SS Chief Officer, Mr Chris Speedy, and I officially launched a new book about the history of the SS in court in times of need. For any members who'd like a copy, please drop by my parliamentary office where I can give them a copy if they wish. It's a fantastic book about a fantastic organisation.
Deputy Leader.
My question is to the Treasurer. Did the Treasurer ask any of his staff or former staff to provide evidence in support of his character to ICAC?
I understand my legal team did, yes.
Supplementary?
Supplementary.
Did your legal team ask for them to give that evidence on your instructions?
Yes, I think, yes.
Deputy Leader.
So can you explain to the House what was the purpose of requiring them to come and give evidence to support your character when you'd given evidence yourself?
Sister Commissioner.
Why did the Commissioner describe the Treasurer's former Chief of Staff, Robert Malinauskas, as, and I quote, trying to paint Minister Koutsantonis in the best possible light, unquote?
Mr Speaker, it is not reasonable for the honourable member to ask a member of the government to speculate on what was in the mind of the Commissioner when he wrote what he's written in his report. But I think it's been made very clear already that the government is in no way running away from or arguing with the findings made by the Commissioner in his report. And as to what thought processes may or may not have been going on in the mind of the Commissioner, that's a matter for the Commissioner.
Deputy Leader.
Having, this is to the Treasurer again, having questioned the Treasurer's former Chief of Staff on evidence that he gave to ICAC, considering the Commissioner said, and I quote, "I've asked him the same question 9 times, but he never gave a straightforward answer to the question." What discussions did you have with Mr Malinauskas before he gave evidence?
Look, Mr Speaker, what is in the report speaks for itself. The findings of the Commissioner speak for themselves. The Treasurer has already indicated that people representing him in the context of this invited people to provide information to the Commission, which they did, and that's an end to the matter.
The member for Morialta is warned for the first time and the member for Goyder is called to order.
Further supplementary?
Yep.
How many of the Treasurer's ministerial staff provided affidavits to the Commissioner on behalf of the Treasurer are members of the Australian Labor Party?
Deputy Premier.
The question as to how many people and who such people were is one that could be answered by a forensic perusal of the report. As to whether or not these people have any or what affiliation, that is a matter for them.
Supplementary.
Is the Treasurer then not prepared to tell us whether he had any conversation with these witnesses before they gave evidence, or whether they are members of the Australian Labor Party?
Deputy Premier. The Deputy Leader, if she makes an utterance outside standing orders, for the next 26 minutes she'll be removed from the chamber. Deputy Premier.
Mr Speaker, the situation is I apprehend that the the Deputy Leader is for some reason disappointed in the findings of the Commissioner. And that is a matter that she may or may not wish to agitate in some other forum. But the fact is that the Treasurer cooperated with the inquiry. The findings of the Commissioner are the findings of the Commissioner. The government is not arguing with what the Commissioner has written. The government has acknowledged that where criticisms were made, they need to be taken seriously. And the Commissioner has acknowledged that, at least in respect of Renewal SA's performance, there have already been important remedial steps taken. And I think the Treasurer and the Premier have certainly during today and yesterday more than thoroughly covered the question of the suggestion in the report that some of the language used by the Treasurer in some instances may not have been ideal. And the Treasurer made a public apology in respect of that matter yesterday. That really, Mr Speaker, is an end to this matter, and raking over the coals about who was invited to speak and what they said. What they said to the Commissioner and what the Commissioner held to be relevant is contained in the body of his report. If the Commissioner had thought it relevant to consider the questions that are being raised by the Deputy Leader when assessing the value or otherwise of the evidence of the individuals concerned, he no doubt would have asked those questions himself. But as the Deputy Leader would appreciate, the Commissioner in his days at the bar was regarded as one of the most fierce forensic cross-examiners ever to be seen. He has a very high reputation as a judge both in the Supreme Court and in the Federal Court of Australia. I think, round for round, he would possibly be at least as forensically capable as the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, possibly more. And I therefore have confidence that he would have asked the appropriate questions.
Deputy Leader.
A further question to the Treasurer. At what point in the Gilman investigation, which from the report started as early, observed from early 2014 until early 2015 when the investigation proper commenced, at what time did the Treasurer decide to seek legal representation?
Mr Speaker, whether or not the Treasurer engaged legal representatives at any particular point in time is, with the greatest of respect to the Deputy Leader, not an appropriate matter for her to be inquiring into. He is entitled, as any citizen is, to seek such advice as he wishes to seek when and if he determines it's necessary for him to do so. And the Deputy Leader would know, being a practitioner of some standing herself, that were the next question hypothetically to be, and what did your lawyers tell you, that would be an entirely inappropriate question. The notion that
Point of order.
He's now asking questions of himself, so clearly it's out of order.
Yes, well, rhetorical questioning of oneself is always available to members of Parliament. I've seen it indulged in many times in the past 25 years. Deputy Premier.
Yes, thank you, Mr Speaker. And as I was asking myself, I would have said to myself that would be inappropriate. That's what I would have said. I would have said, I'm seeking to ask myself to breach legal professional privilege, which would be terrible. And likewise, the fact or not of an individual seeking legal advice is a whisker away from the proposition as to what that advice was, or some other attempt to forensically ascertain at what moment in time that particular decision was made, and then link that to some other event, perhaps a phase of the moon or some other event. It is not an appropriate question.
The member for Davenport is warned.
The Attorney would be pleased to hear that I wouldn't ask such a stupid question. My supplementary to the Treasurer is...
Well, excellent.
His question. So my question now is to the Treasurer, as a supplementary. How were Michael Abbott QC as counsel and Adrian Tessato as solicitors paid?
Again, Mr Speaker, the matters that pass between a client and their legal team are matters between them. And this sort of line of questioning, which is now having failed apparently in the primary objective of obtaining something salacious out of the body of the report itself, we now decide that we're going to go tilling the soil around the edge of it to see if we can dig up some little relic that we can hold up to those who gaze down upon us from other parts.
The member for Hartley's on two
say to them,
warnings
this
already.
is something you can write in your paper tomorrow. This is completely inappropriate.
It would appear to be a breach of legal professional privilege. The Deputy Leader.
My further supplementary then to the Treasurer is, can the Treasurer assure the House that the representation that's been referred to here in this ICAC report, of which you have instructed, has not been paid from the public purse?
Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, again, that is in exactly the same position, but
The Minister for Investment and Trade is called to order. The member for Chaffey is warned. Deputy Premier.
I can indicate to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, in the hope that perhaps this course of questioning will now come to an end, that the answer to her question is that there has been no public money paid.
Further supplementary to the Attorney, has the Attorney approved the payment of any public monies for witnesses to this ICAC inquiry? For representation?
No.
Deputy Premier. The member for Ghana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Tourism. Can the Minister explain how the state government's investments in tourism are helping to attract world-class sporting events?
Treasurer. Oh, no, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for Ghana for the question. Of course, the tourism sector is worth $5.4 billion to the South Australian economy each year. We want to grow that to $8 billion by 2020. And this year in the state budget, we put an extra $35 million in to ensure that we can reach that figure of $8 billion. It's a very, it's going to be a tough figure to reach, but we saw Qatar Airways announce this week that they're flying into Adelaide from May 2nd next year, voted the best airline in the world in 2015, and known as the 5-star airline as well. So it's great to see that the money that we're spending is being picked up by international operators, the very high-level international operators. We're seeing that with more hotels being built. We're seeing that with more seats coming into Adelaide on these international flights. But what we need to do to make sure that that grows even further is to get more events and to market the state, of course. And when we talk about events, Adelaide is a terrific host city for a variety of events, and we're really pleased to inform the House that some of the world's best competitors are in town for the World Duathlon Championships, which I'll open tonight down at the Rotunda. For those who don't know about duathlon, it's like triathlon without the swim leg. It's cycling and it's running. And we'll be showing off the magnificent Riverbank Precinct, Montefiore Hill, the Adelaide Oval. It's just going to be a terrific course for the 1,400 competitors who are here are competing in a variety of duathlon events for prize money of up to $100,000. It's the biggest duathlon event ever held in the Southern Hemisphere, and we're really pleased that it's the first time in 6 years that the organisers, the International Triathlon Union, have actually staged an event in Australia. So it's a terrific event, and I encourage people to get out there and cheer on those people who are competing. It's expected to inject about $3 million into the state economy, and as I've said many times, the best money that we can have in our economy is the money from people interstate and overseas. It's great to really sort of to grow our economy. Other events coming up that we've managed to secure for Adelaide, the Adelaide Motorsports Festival, which my good friend the Minister for Trade launched during the week, and out there with a couple of Ayrton Senna's race cars. It was good to see them back on the grid down at Victoria Park. That's on this weekend. The Bridgestone World Solar Challenge, 18th to the 25th of October, from Darwin down to Adelaide. The Pacific School Games, now this is one of those mass participation events that will bring about 4,000 competitors. And these are big money earners for the state. Economic benefits estimated at about $13.6 million, and of course follows on from the Australian Masters Games, which I spoke about on Tuesday, which injected, we reckon, about $10 million into the economy with 10,000 competitors and officials. So sometimes we go for the events that bring the elite athletes down. Sometimes we get those mass participation ones, and having all these students from around the Pacific coming into Adelaide is just going to be terrific, and they'll bring family members with them, and hopefully tell people when they go back home to wherever they come from what a wonderful time they had in Adelaide. I know Adelaide and South Australian people are always very good to throw out the welcome mat and show people a good time. So we'd love these kids to go home and bring their family back for a holiday sometimes, because that's where the return visits, just like conventions and conferences, is where you really get the economic benefit.
Deputy Leader.
Thank you. My question again is to the Treasurer. Does the Treasurer still believe that this deal at Gilman was in the best interests of South Australians, given the current Chief Executive of Renewal SA, John Hanlon's comments in the report state, "I think it's an extraordinary transaction to make. They quite successfully tied up 10 years' worth of competition. It is just an extraordinary way of tying up your asset. It's an extraordinary transaction that you do question why. There does not seem to be a benefit. There is no benefit to the state in relation to this."
Premier.
Thank you. We do stand by our decision about this being a good deal for South Australia, and the narrow perspective of a land disposal body about maximising the value of a land and the price of a piece of land, and I think, frankly, the erroneous chain of reasoning about the effect on landfill competitors is something we just don't accept. We understood those arguments, and we understand those arguments. We just don't accept them. And as I said before, when I was asked this question on public radio today, public servants advise and governments decide, and it is the province of the cabinet to make these decisions. And one of the recommendations that we are going to have to reflect upon is this whole question of the relationship between the way in which we do, in fact, dispose of land. In the past, LMC was very much a land disposal body, and there's a lot of the old LMC culture left in Renewal SA. The truth is, we're seeking to take parcels of land now and use them for other and more strategic purposes which are more than just about flogging land and maximising its value, and that's what the Cabinet was trying to do here. Now, the truth is that I think we've run into a bit of a difficulty with the old culture of Renewal SA colliding with the ambitions of the Cabinet about using this land for strategic purposes, and we are going to have to review the government's arrangements from that perspective. But no, it is a different perspective, and he's entitled to that view. We just don't share it.
Supplementary.
Leader.
And given the comments of Mr Hanlon, which you don't agree to in the report, how can you have confidence in him being the person asked to action the dealing of the maladministration of Mr Buchan?
Premier.
Well, these are opinions. These are opinions. As it happens, Mr Hanlon is not a qualified valuer, so his opinions about matters outside his areas of expertise needs to be considered in that regard. But just because you don't share somebody's opinion, it doesn't mean that other elements of their expertise aren't full of value. In fact, Mr Hanlon has been an excellent Chief Executive of Renewal SA and has delivered an extraordinary amount of high-value projects for South Australia. I personally have a lot of confidence in him. I certainly have confidence in his capacity to carry out the work that the Deputy Premier has asked him to undertake.
Deputy Leader, and the member for Morford is called to order.
My question is to the Treasurer, Mr Speaker. Why didn't the government sell the Gilman land via an open market, given the Treasurer told the ICAC that if he were advised to do that, he would have?
Premier.
Well, the government made a decision. It wasn't prepared to take the risk that it would lose the deal. I mean, the proponents told us, and they repeated their evidence on oath to the Ombudsman, that they wouldn't have been in this arrangement if they didn't have an exclusive option to pursue it. They were being asked to spend millions of their dollars to actually put themselves in a position to actually to actually settle this transaction, and they weren't prepared to do that. They weren't prepared to go out and actually attract those international investors and actually put that arrangement together, expend their own money, unless they thought there was something at the end of it. And given that this was a unique business model that they had come up with, it was something that we were prepared to entertain, having regard to the challenges for the South Australian economy. And seeing a piece of land that was just sitting there idle for 30 years, we decided we wanted to do something and actually turn it into employment rather than just have it sitting there lying idle.
The member for Carville is warned, and the member for Schubert is warned for the second and final time.
How many other, this is a supplementary, sir, how many other unsolicited bids of which the proponent has indicated that they would not undertake a tender process in those circumstances has the government acceded to?
Well, look, I don't know the answer to that. I think I've mentioned before in answer to a previous question there were 38, I think I mentioned, that unsolicited bids that we've been entertaining. Some of them have been progressed to the next stage. I don't know how many of those were ones that where the proponent said they would not be interested in pursuing in an open tender process, but that's not the only consideration. Another consideration might be intellectual property and the message we send to people who would be discouraged. I mean, it's routine for people to say to us, if we come up with an idea that we've dreamt up, that nobody else has dreamt up, and then you share it with everybody for an open tender process, we think that's unfair. Why would we put our time and effort into developing such an idea? Now, we can't always do that because some ideas aren't unique enough to just quarantine them for a process. And I mean, it's a question of weighing these things up. It will be rare, I think, that we have an unsolicited bid process. But when you consider the many hundreds and thousands of tenders that we run every day through government, in that context, it won't be usual. But from time to time, we reserve the right to do that in the state's interests. And that's the judgment we made. And it's the judgment we made and told the people of South Australia about before the last election. And I noticed you tried to get it up. I noticed you tried to get it up.
Is warned for the
you tried to get it up in a certain by-election. And it didn't seem to resonate really with the community much there. So I think people understand what the government's doing here. They're trying to create jobs. And I understand that the proponent actually had a bit of a coffee meeting with the Leader of the Opposition and told him about the plan. And certainly the proponent left that meeting, I think, feeling as though he had the support of the Leader of the Opposition. So I don't quite know what's happened between now and then.
Leader.
Supplementary to the Premier, does the ACP have any investors in the project to date?
Mr Speaker, I'm not aware precisely of what the investment portfolio of ACP is at any point in time. They are the interface with government, not whoever it is that they have been able to secure or not, as the case might be, as investors behind them. So that is really primarily not our concern as the contracting party. What we're concerned about is whether they meet their milestones and whether they settle. And I think I explained to everybody here yesterday that we are... Tuesday, was it? The same questions you lose.
Minister for Health is called to order. Deputy Leader is warned that she is on 2 warnings.
We are now in a position where there are certain steps which need to be undertaken by ACP At the end of those steps, then it is our expectation that there will be a settlement. Now, it's up to them at that point in time to be in a position to settle. That's our expectation.
Supplementary, sir. Is it not a term of the contract that ACP must inform the government of investors and seek your approval of those investors? Have they sought any approval for investors that they've obtained to date?
Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't necessarily mean, because I don't accept necessarily the summary given by the Leader of the Opposition of the terms and obligations under the contract necessarily is accurate, with all due respect. But assuming the question is fairly framed in that there was some obligation on them to discuss the matter with me, I'm not aware of that having been discussed with me. It may or may not have been discussed with public servants. I would just have to take that on notice.
Leader.
Is it not also a term of the contract that the state government must participate in attracting those investors to South Australia? Has any work been done by the government to attract those investors, and can the government update the House?
Premier.
This is a very similar question that was asked by the Deputy Leader of the Opposition some time ago. No, I said that's right, and I do. We meet and promote.
Member for Newland is warned for the second and final time.
We meet and promote the economic opportunities that exist in South Australia in the oil and gas sector. We're happy to provide briefings to any particular investors. Whether or not they find their way into the investor stream for ACP is not something that we necessarily would be aware of. So there is at every one of the industry briefings that we go to, whether in this country or in other countries, we're always seeking to promote our natural resources and the other opportunities that exist. And so I'm sure at one of those briefings there may well have been somebody who may have shown some interest in the ACP proposal, but I'm not presently familiar of whether any of those people, if they do exist, have then gone on to form a relationship with ACP.
Deputy Leader.
My question is to the Treasurer. Is the government pursuing Mr Fred Hanson to repay all or part of the $385,000 payout he received when he left Renewal SA last year?
We're not, are we? No. No, we're not.
Deputy Leader. Leader.
Thank you, sir. My question is to the Premier. I apologise. When did the Premier first become aware that the Treasurer was provided with a minute from the Renewal SA to be passed on to the Premier on the 4th of July 2013?
I have to take that question on notice. I'm not familiar with the document to which the member refers.
Leader.
I'd just like to remind the Premier from the report where it says that letter, and I quote, "That letter was never sent because although the minute suggested it be sent to the Premier, Minister Koutsantonis did not provide the minute to the Premier." When did the Premier first become aware of this minute?
Premier.
Well, I mean, now we know from the way in which the report with the passage has been cited that it was not sent to me, and so asked when I received something which was not received. So obviously, I think I will take this question on notice, look at it carefully, because I think we've already heard that there's a trick in the question.
The member for Unley will withdraw from the chamber for the next half hour, and the member for Newland will join him.
That would be quite a tete-a-tete, sir. Supplementary to the Premier. Is the Premier concerned that information intended to be provided to him as the Premier from one of his government agencies was concealed from him by the Treasurer?
Well, you see, this is another example of the Leader of the Opposition making his own findings rather than relying upon the findings that are made by the Ombudsman. So he's not satisfied with the findings of the Ombudsman. He, in fact, now wants to actually make his own findings about concealment of relevant documents. If the Ombudsman had wanted to make a finding about that, and
if the Leader is on 2 warnings.
If he had wanted to make a finding which was a negative finding about the Treasurer, I think we can see that he didn't hesitate about doing those sorts of things, and I'm sure he would have added this to the list of things that he wanted to agitate, and he didn't. And I think that this is, I mean, we've seen this all before. We've seen this all before, where the opposition seeks to run their own separate inquiries, not satisfied with us establishing the Independent Commissioner Against Corruption, not satisfied with us taking very seriously and cooperating with inquiries of this sort, not satisfied with us responding to his recommendations in full and accepting his recommendations. They seek to put themselves above the ICAC Commissioner.